human trafficking, and human rights and migration. What is human trafficking? Human trafficking is a serious crime and a grave violation of human rights. It involves the recruitment, transportation, transfer, and harboring or receipt of the people through force, fraud, or coercion, with the intentions of exploiting them. Victims of human trafficking are often forced into situations such as sexual exploitation, forced labor, domestic servitude, or even organ removal. These illegal activities affects millions of people worldwide, particularly women, children, and vulnerable migrants. What is example of human trafficking? Human trafficking is an illegal trade of people through force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of exploitation. It involves recruiting, transport, harboring, or receiving individuals, using deception, threats, violation, or abuse of power, forcing victims into sexual exploitations, forced labor, domestic servitude, or organ removal, child soldering. And other example of human trafficking. This is an act of human trafficking including recruitment, finding and convincing people to move, often with the false promises of jobs or better life, transporting, moving victims from one place to another locally or internationally, and harboring, hiding or holding victims in one location, and also the receiving, which is taking control of victims either to exploit them or sell them to others. And another example of human trafficking, this is also goal of trafficking, to use victims for profit. So first is sexual exploitation, forcing someone into prostration or pornography, and forced labor, making someone work long hours under harsh conditions without fair pay or freedom. Domestic servitude, forcing people to work in home as maids or nannies with little or no freedom. Organ removal, illegally taking and selling a victim's organs, often with life-threatening consequence. And lastly is child soldering, forcing children to fight in wars, act as spies, or support military groups.
The three elements of human trafficking. The first one is the act, what is done. Second one, the means, or how it is done. The third one is the purpose, why it is done. So the first one is the act, what is done. This includes the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of individuals. It's the physical movement or control of the person. For example, recruitment, persuading or enlisting someone to travel, work, or move somewhere, often under a false promises. Another example is transportation, physically moving the person from one place to another, locally or internationally. The second one is the means, or how it is done. This refers to the methods used to gain control over a victim, such as threats, force, coercion, abduction, fraud, deception, or abuse of power. For example, fraud, lying or making false promises to deceive the victim, saying they'll be a model but forcing them into a prostitution. The second example is the abuse of power, taking advantage of someone's vulnerable situation like poverty, lack of education, or immigration status. The third one is the purpose, why it is done. The goal of human trafficking is the always exploitation, which may include sexual exploitation, forced labor, slavery, servitude, or organ removal. For example, sexual exploitation, forcing someone into a prostitution or pornography. The second example is the forced labor, making someone work against their will under a poor or abusive condition.
So let's talk about the current state of human trafficking in the Philippines. So according to Sarah McGeorge and the Anti-Human Trafficking Intelligence Cell of Mercyhurst University 2022, an estimated of 7,840 people in the Philippines live in the condition akin to modern day slavery. So the country is significant source of online sexual exploitation of children. Next is the approximately 60,000 to 100,000 Filipinos children are affected by labor or sex trafficking. Next is the vulnerable groups include the indigenous people, internally displaced individuals, women, and children, especially from rural areas, conflict zones, and improvised urban communities. Next is we have the labor trafficking. Filipinos men are exploited in sectors like fishing, shipping, construction, manufacturing, and agriculture. And women often face exploitation through domestic and hospitality rules. Next is that child trafficking. Children are subjected to both and sexual exploitation, with some being sold by other families. The labor code allows parents to permit children under 15 to work, leading to the instance of children young as 6 being employed. Next is we have the child soldier recruitment. In religions like Mindanao's, armed groups such as the Maute groups and Moro National Liberation Front recruits child soldiers to participate in their movements. Next is we have the government efforts. What did they do in the Philippine government? So the Philippines has achieved a Tier 1 ranking from the U.S. Department of State, and indicating full compliance with minimum standard for eliminating trafficking. So despite this, the high number of victims underscore the needs for continued and enhanced effort for the government to improve and the citizen is to be safe.
My topic is all about how can you relate human trafficking to migration. First is vulnerability of migrants. Migrants, especially undocumented or disparate individuals, often face limited legal protection and support. And traffickers take advantage of their lack of knowledge, language barriers, and uncertain legal status to deceive and control them. Second is smuggling versus trafficking. While smuggling involves a willing but illegal agreement to cross borders, it can easily turn into trafficking if migration can pay smugglers. They are forced to work to repay a debt. Their documents are confiscated or they're threatened. The third is fake job offers and recruitment. Many victims are trafficked during migration for work, especially in domestic labor, construction, agriculture, or entertainment. And recruiters may process legal jobs abroad but instead sell victims into exploitation.
Migration increases. People fleeing conflict, poverty, or disaster often migrate with a little planning or support. In such chaotic environments, traffickers find it easier to manipulate, abduct, or deceive vulnerable individuals. Need for rights. Migration policies. Ensuring that migrants have access to legal channels, support service, and human rights protection is critical to preventing trafficking. When migration is safe and well regulated, traffickers have fewer opportunity to exploit policies.
Understanding human rights in migration. Migration is a natural part of human history. People move for many reasons: work, safety, education, or a better life. Regardless of their legal status, all migrants are human beings and as such, they are entitled to fundamental human rights. These rights are protected by international laws and agreements. So, migration is a natural part of life and people move for reasons like work, safety, or education. No matter their status, all migrants have basic human rights and international laws are in place to protect those rights. I'm Midget Cadet Lo Antonio Dueduga, and I'm going to tackle about understanding human rights in migration. So, right to life, liberty, and security. Every migrant has the right to be alive, free from violence, and to feel safe whether they are documented or not. Right to protection from exploitation and abuse. Migrants are particularly vulnerable to human trafficking, forced labor, and sexual exploitation. International law insists that countries must protect all migrants, especially children, women, in those irregular situations from abuse. As what I've understand, all migrants, regardless of legal status, have the right to life, safety, and freedom from violence. They are especially vulnerable to abuse such as human trafficking, forced labor, and sexual exploitation. International law requires countries to protect all migrants, especially women, children, and those in irregular situations from harm and ensure their rights are respected. Understanding human rights in migration. Access to justice, health, and migrants should have fair access to justice, meaning they can report crimes and seek legal protection, healthcare services, especially during emergencies or childbirth, education for their children even if their legal status is uncertain. Denying these rights can lead to further marginalization and vulnerability. The adverse effect of human trafficking to globalization, bridging the gap. Human trafficking has a profound and damaging impact globalization, affecting not just individuals involved but also international economies, social structures, and human rights. Here are the adverse effects of human trafficking on globalization. Human trafficking harms globalization by exploiting vulnerable people, weakening labor rights, and fueling illegal networks. It creates unfair and markets, damages international trust, and slows economic and social progress. It also challenges global cooperation on human rights and law enforcement.
First is undermines human rights and ethical standards. Human rights trafficking violates fundamental human rights such as the right to freedom, security, and dignity. It undermines ethical practices and principles of equality that globalization is meant to promote as businesses and countries increasingly become interconnected. The exploitation of trafficked individuals can erode global efforts to improve labor standards, equality, and human rights. Second, disrupts legal and fair labor markets. Human trafficking contributes to the underground economy by feeding cheap, exploited labor into markets. Illegally trafficked workers may be forced into industries like construction, agriculture, and domestic works where their labor is undervalued and unregulated. This creates unfair competition for businesses that follows labor laws and ethical practices, ultimately undermining fair trade and market stability. Third, trafficking networks exploit global travel systems and such as airline shipping and immigration controls. This reduces trust in international mobility and can lead to restrictive policies that harm legitimate travelers and businesses. For instance, countries may tighten visa requirements or impose stricter border controls affecting tourism and trade.
So number 4, social fragmentation and increase in inequality. So first, human trafficking contributes to social inequality by exploiting vulnerable populations such as women, children, and migrants who may already be marginalized. And second, this leads to displacement and social fragmentation where victims are often left without support, leading to a cycle of poverty and disenfranchisement. And third, it further depends societal divides as people are trafficked for forced labor or sexual exploitation in globalized industries. And number 5, weakens national security and global cooperation. So first, trafficking is cross-border in nature, which requires global cooperation to combat. And second, nation that fail to address trafficking create safe havens for traffickers, thus weakening international cooperation on law enforcement and human rights. And third, as trafficking undermines global security, it can fuel further crises such as refugee movements and transnational terrorism. And last, harm to global development and sustainable growth. So first, sustainable development goals, especially those focused on poverty reduction, quality work, and equality, are severely hindered by human trafficking. And second, by exploiting people trafficking stance, social and economic development, ensuring that many populations are denied the opportunity to contribute and benefit from the global economy.
Globalizations. The expanses of globalization has shaped economics and societies worldwide, enabling greater economic activity and mobility. However, this increased movement across borders also brings significant risks, especially for vulnerable populations like migrants. In many cases, migrants seeking better lives face limited legal pathways, pushing them into regular migration routes. Traffickers often take advantage of these situations, offering defective opportunities that lead to explorations in industries such as agriculture, constructions, or domestic work. Without proper regulations and protections, globalizations can unintentionally create conditions that enable human rights violations and human trafficking.